Welcome to this explainer on TEMA 35 Notebook Elm. We're jumping right into a really fascinating, rigorous academic dive today. We're looking at the sophisticated architecture of the English verbal system. Specifically, we're talking about the immense syntactical weight carried by the non-finite forms of the English verb, the infinitive, the gerund, and the participle. If you are pursuing true grammatical mastery, analyzing structural linguistics, or preparing for high-level academic evaluations, you are in exactly the right place. We're going to unpack the foundational morphology of these forms, but more importantly, we'll dissect the profound semantic nuances and morphosyntactic complexities that govern how they actually function within contemporary English discourse. Here is our agenda for today's masterclass. We'll start with an introduction, then move to the infinitive, followed by the gerund, semantic shifts, the participle, and finally, we'll wrap up with pedagogical implications. Section 1. Introduction. The dual nature. So, to really wrap our heads around advanced English syntax, we've got to strictly define what a non-finite form actually is. Basically, these verbs lack any inherent personal or temporal markers. That means they don't agree with the subject, and they can't anchor a sentence in time. Because of this, there's no way they can serve as the primary independent predicate of a clause. But here's the cool part. Their true linguistic superpower comes from their highly versatile dual nature. They act like a bridge between grammatical categories. Take the phrase, "I want to leave quickly." The finite verb want carries all the tense and the first-person agreement. But that non-finite phrase, to leave, it's acting nominally as the object of that desire, while stubbornly holding on to its verb-like ability to take the adverbial modifier quickly. This hybridization, that is the absolute core of non-finite architecture.
Module 1. The infinitive.
Okay, the infinitive. We often think of this as the foundational base name of the verb itself, right? But what's genuinely fascinating here is that even without a traditional conjugated tense, the infinitive beautifully expresses both aspect and voice across 4 distinct structural states. Just look at this breakdown. The present infinitive, like to eat, usually maps to actions happening at the exact same time as the main verb. Then you have the perfect infinitive, to have finished, which brilliantly signals anteriority, meaning the action wrapped up before the main verb's timeline. We can also stretch out that duration with the progressive infinitive, to be working, or show a directed, received action with the passive infinitive, to be sent. This matrix is an absolute game changer because it lets English communicate incredibly complex timelines without getting bogged down in heavily conjugated, clunky, finite clauses. Now, stepping away from the full infinitive, the one with the particle to, we run into the bare or plain infinitive. This morphological variant is locked down. It is strictly confined to very precise, syntactically restricted environments. You're never going to see a plain infinitive acting as an independent nominal subject. Instead, its distribution is complementary. It must follow modal auxiliaries and the auxiliary do. You'll also spot it immediately after perception verbs and causative expressions. Actually, think about the psychological difference in authority between causative verbs for a second. Compare, "I made him clean his room," using that coercive plain infinitive, with "I asked him to clean his room," which uses the full infinitive for a polite request. This syntax is literally mirroring the semantic weight. It's brilliant. Let's push this into advanced territory. We absolutely have to talk about the accusative with full infinitive structure. This is where English shows off its Latinate syntactical roots, elegantly maneuvering verbs of will, influence, or cognition. Think about the sentence, "I persuaded her to leave." From a strict grammar standpoint, the pronoun her is in the accusative object case, governed entirely by the verb persuaded. But semantically, her is acting as the logical subject of that non-finite clause, to leave. Grasping this specific intersection, where one single word is pulling double duty as both a syntactic object and a semantic subject, is a major hallmark of high-level English fluency. Module 2. The gerund. So moving on to the gerund. Fundamentally, a gerund is a verbal noun. It's this morphosyntactic hybrid that perfectly bridges the lexicon and syntax. On the outside, its nominal side, it slides right into standard noun slots. It can be a subject, it can take determiners, or accept genitive modifications like talking for talking's sake. It even forms lexical compounds, like a swimming pool. But, and here's the kicker, while it's parading around as a noun in the broader sentence, its internal architecture is still deeply, undeniably verbal. It can absolutely take a direct object, like in reading books, and it can be modified by adverbs, as in reading slowly. This simultaneous dual citizenship is exactly what makes the gerund so vital to the language. And there are mandatory environments where you simply have to use the gerund. One of the absolute non-negotiable structural rules of English is this. If a verb immediately follows a preposition, it must take the gerund form. Period. It's a rigid architectural constraint. Think about a classic learner error, like someone saying, I am looking forward to see you. Because the word to is functioning as a preposition there, and not an infinitive marker, the only acceptable form is the gerund. I am looking forward to seeing you. Beyond that, the gerund is totally obligatory after certain semantic categories of verbs, like those dealing with evasion or completion, think avoid or finish, and in fixed idiomatic phrases like it's no use or I can't help.
Module 3. Semantic shifts.
Have you ever stopped to think how one tiny little suffix can completely change a life-altering sentence? The verb stop is a textbook example of this semantic showdown. When a verb can take either a gerund or an infinitive, your syntactical choice forces a massive semantic shift. If you go with the infinitive, it signals purposeful intent. You're interrupting one unspecified action in order to perform another. So, I stopped to smoke means you literally halted your walking just to pull out a cigarette. But flip that to the gerund, and it signals the definitive cessation of the action itself. I stopped smoking means you quit the habit altogether. It is the exact same base verb, but that non-finite complement completely rewrites the reality of the sentence. You see the exact same thing with verbs like remember, forget, or regret. They act like these incredible temporal pivots. It's basically mental time travel dictated entirely by your choice of complement. The infinitive points the mind forward, toward a necessity or some unfulfilled obligation. If I say, remember to lock the door, that action lives in the prospective future. It still needs to happen. The gerund, on the other hand, looks backward. It captures a lived experience. Saying, I remember locking the door points retrospectively to an action that is securely in the past. This divergence in time is just a fantastic quirk of English cognitive grammar. Module 4. The participle. Now let's look at the present participle. This shares the exact same ing morphology as the gerund, which, let's be honest, is a huge source of confusion in linguistic analysis. But functionally, they are entirely distinct. While the gerund is playing the role of a noun, the participle is combining verbal, adjectival, and adverbial properties. When you pair it with the auxiliary to be, it becomes the structural engine that drives every single progressive tense in the English language. It highlights ongoing dynamic perception, like I saw her walking. Plus, it frequently acts as an attributive adjective. To tell a true participle adjective apart from a gerund, linguists use something called the verb test. Because the dynamic verb to interest exists, the phrase an interesting novel is using interesting not as a noun, but as an active participle adjective modifying the text. And when we analyze the past, or ed participle, we stumble into the critical concept of positional syntax and syntactic ambiguity. In English, unlike a lot of Romance languages, where you can move adjectives around a bit more freely, the exact position of a participle dictates its entire semantic output. Putting the participle in the pre-modification slot usually implies a permanent or inherent characteristic. So, the concerned people translates to the worried, anxious people. But if you just shift that exact same participle into post-modification, the people concerned, you completely alter the meaning. Now it indicates temporary involvement or relevance. They're just the people relevant to the specific matter at hand. This positional rigidity is absolutely essential for conveying precise meaning. Module 5. Pedagogical implications. All right, any rigorous academic explainer requires us to ground our analysis in the authoritative literature. Heavy-hitting linguists like Randolph Quirk, F.R. Palmer, and Marianne Sells-Mersha have mapped these territories extensively in their comprehensive grammars. And then you have Douglas Bieber's corpus-based approach, which mathematically proves how the frequency of these forms shifts dramatically across different registers, whether you're reading academic prose or just having a casual conversation. When we synthesize their frameworks, we can really untangle this architecture for our learners. Basically, if a non-finite form is dominating a nominal function, you're squarely in the realm of the infinitive or gerund. If it's modifying a noun or propelling a progressive aspect, you're dealing with participles. Understanding this high-level theoretical taxonomy gives us a vital bedrock for practical instruction. Imagine one of your students writes an essay, and they are heavily relying on incorrect infinitives after prepositions. For example, they write, I am interested in to learn. This is a classic L1 interference error, and it's especially common for native speakers of Romance languages, where prepositions are routinely followed by infinitives. By mastering the strict taxonomy we've just been talking about, educators can explicitly target and correct the root cause of these structural misunderstandings, rather than just endlessly treating the symptoms. We can anticipate their semantic confusion between stop smoking and stop to smoke, and we can effectively guide them through the rigid architectural rules governing English prepositions and gerunds. To wrap things up, consider this sentence. Walking down the street, the building looked impressive. You've probably spotted it. That is the infamous dangling participle. Because the introductory participial clause lacks its own explicit subject, English syntax dictates that it absolutely must attach to the subject of the main clause. So, grammatically speaking, this sentence is asserting that a concrete building itself was casually taking a stroll down the street. No way, right? So, how would you guide a student to fix that structural misstep? I'll leave you to ponder that pedagogical challenge. I really hope this deep dive into DIMA 35 Notebook LM has sharpened your structural eye, equipped you with some rigorous academic theory, and thoroughly prepared you for the classroom. Keep analyzing, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.